Episode 61. I want to say pretty quiet week, but it's actually never really a quiet week. What do we have? Let's see. Tariff. Oh yeah, I guess we have to obligated at this point to talk about tariffs because the first one is in the books, kind of in the books, but not really in the books. But anyways, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then what else? Yeah, Google's had some problems this week because of Apple's testimony during the trial that I guess Google's going through about being a monopoly. And so their testimony kind of put a damper on Google this week. So we'll touch a little bit on that and open mic for the rest of the time, I guess. So there we go. Let's see how
Yeah, I'll use your famous words, Tony. Pretty slow week this week. But it really was. I mean, last week was all of the earnings finishing up for the Mag 7. And this week, I guess, it's May. What do they say? Sell in May, go away.
They say that, but man, the stock market is at pre-liberation day levels, which is kind of amazing. Kind of makes you wish it bought more of the dip, but is it actually priced in? Who knows? Nothing.
Isn't that what always happens when the dip comes and people say buy the dip, and then you all say, "Oh, I wish you bought more of the dip."
Yeah, I wish you bought more of the dip, but apparently, retail has been the largest buyers over the past 12 days of net inflows, while institutions and hedge funds have been the biggest sellers, which makes you a bit curious of, is this where, right, retail has become the exit liquidity because of something more longer term that's big money is seeing, right? Which is usually the case, right? The term buy high, sell low comes in. It's because retail tends to always be at the top. So we'll find out. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's what it was, right? The big guys are away now. They sold.
Yeah.
And now they're just starting their summers.
Yeah. Maybe retail has got it right and they'll come back and send the market to all-time highs. But again, all waiting on bated breath for these trade deals. Why not jump right into it, I guess?
Well, no, really quick, related to the stock market. It triggered me to think about news that did come out around Warren Buffett.
Yes, that's right.
Who
Big
announced
news.
his retirement. So I think we all knew it was coming at some point. He's getting a little old there. He needs to pass the torch somehow.
Yeah.
I think this is a good move to retire. And as you all know, he's been selling a lot in the last couple of years here, right? Building a cash pile. And so I think he's ready for retirement.
So he'll be out at the end of 2025.
At the end of this year, right?
Still got half the rest of the year to transition and set up Berkshire for the next century, right? So
yeah, that's nice, right? Like, here's hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Now,
do what I did.
Yeah, what I did.
Yeah, but I was reading some of the stats. It was just kind of crazy when he started in 1962. I think it's the right year. It was the 60s, but I think it's 62, where he bought Berkshire, which was a tractor factory. It's a factory of some sort. He turned it into this conglomerate, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, I think the big part is that it's still sitting on $350-$60 billion in cash.
Yeah, that's just cash. Portfolio.
Yeah, not the portfolio, but it's the largest cash holding that Berkshire has ever had. And everybody's giving him credit for basically selling the top. And they're still waiting, I guess, once the transition happens, maybe they'll start putting it to use. Who knows?
Yeah, I totally think that's what it is. I think here's a cash pile. It's for the next person to take over and, borrow their strategy with.
No.
But I mean, the top is never the top because the stock market always rises long term.
Yep. Always. We'll see.
Yeah. But it did pop this week. The stock market popped. Crypto popped tremendously around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And most of that was due to the tariff hopium that people are having this week due to discussions between the U.S. and China, for one. It's the first time I think US and China are meeting to actually discuss this whole trade tariff debacle that Trump has brought forth upon China.
Mhm.
As a reminder, China's tariffed at about 145% now. That means if a US company wants to import, say, I don't know, a refrigerator for $1,000,
Mhm.
they're actually going to have to pay another $1,460 on top of that before they can sell it.
Crazy.
So there's been a lot of hoarding by companies. There's been a lot of strategic manufacturing shifts. Apple, for example, is strategically trying to shift their production to India. And there's been a lot of small business pain, especially in the small business side, who need to pay an arm and a leg more just to import things they need to run their small business.
Yeah.
There's a notable one here in the Seattle area. Molly Moons is an ice cream company out here that's really good, and she's been advocating and kind of just telling her story around how tariffs are affecting her small business. And I think it's like the spoons that she imports, it's going to cost her another $160,000 just to use these spoons.
Mhm.
So China, they are meeting in Switzerland. From what
Today.
Hmm?
Today.
Today.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, most people don't think anything's going to come out of it, but we'll see.
Yep.
And then the second was the US and the UK, who have put an agreement on paper. Nothing has, I think, been finalized or enacted yet.
Yep.
But they put an agreement on paper to have an actual trade deal. And so this is the first trade deal since Trump imposed all these tariffs a few weeks ago. I was like, a few weeks ago? Yeah, it really was just a few weeks ago. And so both of these are positive signs for the market, which is why, like you said, retail primarily
Yeah.
started piling in.
Yeah. So everybody's been posting or like trying to figure out, all right, what is this UK trade deal? Can it serve as a framework for the rest of the discussions going on with all the other countries? And so I think some of the takeaways that we've gotten from this is the US is looking at a baseline at minimum of a 10% tariff. And it was important because the UK is one of the few countries that we actually have a surplus with. So surplus, for those who don't know, is we actually export more to the UK than we import from them. And so we were already doing good with them, but we're still going to tariff them 10%. And so that's a bit concerning because generally, if this is the framework for the rest of the tariff deals, we are generally just going to be paying a 10% federal tax for anything imported into the US. So that doesn't appear to be going away. So everybody's going to experience a 10% price increase across the board for the most part.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just like, it's kind of weird. I mean, if you look at it, it's like we already had surplus with the UK. The UK is lowering their tariffs.
Yeah, 5.1% to 1.8%.
Yeah. And then our tariff from the UK goes up from 3.4 to 10%. So basically, US consumers end up paying more. UK consumers actually end up paying less. And this is supposed to be a win. So I think that's what people are still trying to digest. And also note, everybody's calling this like the lowest of the low hanging fruits that
Yeah,
we could have accomplished.
UK.
Yeah. It's like one of our
The other America.
the other America, basically.
All the British people are like rolling their eyes right now.
Yeah.
Sorry. What we mean is that we have the best relationships with this country. So
Yeah.
it is the low hanging fruit and the
Yeah.
easiest one to probably accomplish. Other than Canada, which is
You mean the
not
51st
going
state?
well. Yeah.
Future 51st state. But yeah. I think you can.
That's another one to mention. The Trump and the Prime Minister of Canada met, right?
Yes, Carney. He's the newly elected prime minister, right? Canada has a prime
Yeah.
minister. Yeah, newly elected
And
prime minister.
and Trump was jockeying the idea of joining the US, and
Yeah,
he explicitly said Canada is not for sale. We never will be.
yeah,
And then Trump had to get his last word in and said,
yeah,
nothing's for never.
yeah. Nothing's never for sale at the right price.
So
Yeah,
comical to watch.
yeah. So we'll see. Hey, we'll see if where Canada shakes out. But UK kind of like deal is quote in the books as far as I'm sure the administration um, is concerned. And yeah, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But people are they at their press conference they were joking about Rolls Royce, Land Rovers, and I'm like, you know, people who are well off, the extra 10% is probably not going to be a big deal if you're looking to buy a Rolls Royce. It's just
Yeah.
not, right? And so it was kind of like billionaires talking basically in the Oval Office is what it felt like. It's like, oh, okay, so they're yeah, it is kind of ridiculous. But anyways, one deal in the book.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about tariffs in the past and how tariffs are bad for the US economy because they could add to inflation. Companies need to pay essentially a additional cost. Tariff is not a tax, remember, but they need to pay an additional cost on importing these items. And then that money goes to the government.
Yeah.
So that's why tariff revenue is marked as basically we're looking at this image. We'll put it on the overlay, but it says United Kingdom trade deal, new market access, $5 billion of exports. That's because tariffs are being lowered, right, for exports from the US to the UK. And then $6 billion in tariff revenue, meaning things that we import. For those people importing British items will pay that tariff. And then the other things there. All in all, I think $11 billion of positive gains between tariffs and new market access. I guess that's like US companies able to, distribute more, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think beef was the big one. It's like, oh, finally, the UK just doesn't buy US beef, and now they're going to buy, our big, beautiful beef. But the reason why they don't is because UK cattle is highly modified, and it generally doesn't meet UK or the EU standards for their food safety. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's interesting. It's like, it's not being bought because we don't treat our food source as well as they do. So it was kind of funny. And Trump said that too. And then whoever the Secretary of Agriculture was trying to correct him and say, no, 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 our beef is great, right? And so this will be a new market for our cattle ranchers, which it's not. It's just our food practices are, I would say, subpar relative to a lot of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So
No, for
again,
sure.
free trade, it'll still mean they won't buy our food because it just doesn't meet their standards. But again, we'll see. It's the first deal.
They'll probably buy our tobacco
Yeah.
since, if you're smoking anyways,
Yeah.
why do you care about these standards?
Yeah. Yeah. But oh yeah, so it's UK was I know we talked about it's one of the few countries like count on your hands that we actually were surplus. It's our 11th largest trading partner. So but yeah, so we'll see. The big ones obviously is China, Vietnam, where we source a lot of our clothing. So I think that's where it'll really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, there we go.
Well, I'm happy as my portfolio started to get some breathing room and started to come back up instead of continuing to go down. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, we're back above
What happens?
Liberation Day prices, amazingly enough, because apparently tariffs don't matter at this point. Even though now we know there'll be a 10% tariff that wasn't there before across the board. And to me, it's like the market hasn't priced it in,
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm mostly cash now, surprisingly. I was looking around. I was like, oh, I didn't realize I had so much of my port was not there anymore.
What are you waiting for?
Of the recession. this next earnings cycle is what I'll be waiting for, because I think before now, it was before any impacts of tariffs. And this next quarter, we'll start to see like, all right, what is the actual impact of all these tariffs? Because
Yeah.
I know you'd mentioned like the shipping and stuff. Like May is when the last remaining container ships from China, as an example, arrive
No.
before the tariffs were implemented.
Yeah.
So everything after May is like we're out of stuff, and all the new stuff at the new tariff level is coming in. So that's probably what I'll wait for. I mean, if there's a big dip, then I might nibble some, but generally I'll be waiting to see what the next earnings cycle looks like. Because nobody gave guidance this time around. It was like, we don't have
Okay.
enough, we don't know enough to give guidance. It's like, well, how do you make a decision if you can't tell us what's going to happen? So I went mostly cash. I'm just going to gamble 0 day options.
Day trader.
Day trader. I don't know. We'll see. I should go back into meme coins. I've been ignoring it for the past month because the market was down so much. But now that we're back up, it's like risk on.
All right. Well, we'll see what other deals start to surface in the next month here. But I'm assuming Trump's going to have more to talk about in the next 4 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. A second story, Apple. Apple over the last week had released some news that they're planning to build their own AI search capability. And by doing so, they would not need Google search anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know, Google search is the preferred and integrated search for Apple's Safari browser on iOS. And I think in desktop Safari as well, right?
I don't know. I don't use Safari on desktop. So.
Yeah. I assume it is. But yeah, whenever you do a search in your browser on your iPhone, that's actually using Google search.
Oh, yeah. Yes. It's the default on Safari desktop too. Yes.
And I believe Apple has been paying Google $20 billion. The last deal was $20 billion to actually license that or use that in their Safari browser. But with the whole AI wave, now that Apple wants to get on it, they talked about AI search to replace it. And as a result, Google's share price dropped 8%. Was it in a day? Which led to the largest drop in Google's share price ever.
Yeah, it was the biggest in quite a while. So
yeah, probably not ever, but yes, in a while.
It was a big drop.
Yeah.
So I think that the issue with Apple's testimony, I think, is it's like people knew this, but I guess it just hit home that their search position, which is right there, their what is it, golden goose?
I don't know.
The golden goose, right? Lay the golden eggs. It's like, anyways. So the point being is that their search, they were testifying that they were seeing search declines fell
because of ChatGPT and
because of
Claude,
whatever reason, Perplexity, ChatGPT, this transition to AI search, and so it's just kind of showing where Google potentially has a weakness in their business, right? Which everybody already knew, but Apple's saying it's just kind of hit home, I guess, at this point, finally. But like yesterday, Google put out a blog post that no, this is not true. We're actually seeing increase in searches as the way they define it, etc. And so, Google kind of came back to the week. It came like halfway. Like it dropped to like under 150 and it came back to like 155 by the end of the week. So, but I think the real issue is that, when you think about search, right, the business model is all about you clicking a link to go someplace, right? But AI changes that dynamic to where you don't have to click anywhere. It's just all the information is just there for you.
It just tells you.
It just tells you, right? So that this over the past 10 years, right, of people figuring out like SEO and how do we get you to click a link to go to a website in order for the website or the company to monetize you there, right? It's like non-existent now. And so I think that's really the crux of the transition that needs to happen is how does Google monetize this new kind of like paradigm of search, right? And the other challenge is that it's not doing it by itself anymore, right? It has other companies that are trying to figure out the same thing. And now it's to see like, can Google move fast enough to compete this transition to figure out how do we monetize not clicking through to go actually see the content of a website. So I think that's really where we're at. It's just Apple's testimony kind of like hit home, right? So to
Yeah.
speak. Google's really got a problem here. And they haven't shown how they're actually solving it in a meaningful way. Especially when OpenAI talks about, they're seeing like 400 million searches a month, a week. I forget what the word, but it was like a very big number. And it's like, where do those 400 million searches come from? It's going to come from Google because that's where most people do their searches.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think it is interesting. You mentioned SEO and whatnot, and I think it is interesting problem to think about because in the future, people don't need to click on links anymore, and it just tells you. And so there comes in like the data set underlying it, right?
Yeah.
How confident the data is, how relevant, and also how old the data is, I think is
Yeah.
some of the keys to which companies are going to have to think about shifting their websites and other things too. Because I can imagine, it just tells you, but then, and ChatGPT does this today, like, what are the sources, right? Well, that's where people are going to have to probably bid now and pay for is like to be featured as a source.
Yeah.
And how do you get featured as a source? Well, you can bid on it or you can have the most accurate, up-to-date, data.
Yeah.
Having right now SEO is in general sense based on keywords and link traffic, right?
Yeah.
Like other sites pointing to your site, for example, because that signals that you are probably a reputable piece of content.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the right keywords, if you have the right content, if you have a good reputation, then you'll show up high in organic search results.
Yeah.
Or you can just pay for a spot.
Yeah. So like from the AI perspective, I mean, it's not even about just being included as a source. It's like as a user, right? Did the AI give you enough information to satisfy you up front? Which is kind of the direction they've gone, right? Is like they give you kind of like, this wall of text of here's all the important things you need to know, the TLDR, which it seems like where everything is moving to now is the TLDR. Does that basically stop you from going to view the actual source? Because at that point you're like, oh, okay, that's enough for me. I don't need to go anyplace else.
Yeah.
So I think that's really the biggest problem that these companies are trying to figure out. Is the subscription model the new thing?
Yeah.
Or no? I don't think they make enough from it, to be honest.
No, they don't. You can make, any company who can own and dominate ads is pretty much set.
Yeah.
For a long time. I don't think Apple can build their own search AI thing.
I think they said they're not interested in building search capability. So
They just want to use a model like,
yeah, they just want to license or use somebody else's, but they're not interested in, which makes, I guess it kind of makes sense because it's not part of their business model, right? Yes, they do services, but not in that way. Like they'd have to build entirely different infrastructure and such to basically create this. Who knows? Maybe it changes whoever takes over Tim Cook, right? But for now, it's not an area they're working on. I think they've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's an interesting problem.
Yeah. I've started to use Claude a bit more. I want to see. Been hearing some good things lately, so I want to start using it more just to see how I feel about. I've quite honestly a bit annoyed by ChatGPT the last month here. Just does these things that, yes, it's getting better in some ways, but it's also getting worse in many other ways.
Yeah. I should try and use Claude. It's supposedly better at coding, right? Is it Claude or is it? Yeah, I think it's Claude that's better at coding. I was trying to use ChatGPT. I was trying to create and edit like a Pine script for TradingView for an indicator. And it's very challenging. It was actually not easy to do.
Yeah.
But anyways. So there
All
we
right.
go.
Well, AI. You know, I was talking about this too. We were talking about you said something around companies, trying to replace. I forget what it was, but it just triggered me to think about Netflix and maybe just to bring Netflix back into our conversation as like, don't sleep on Netflix.
All-time highs, man.
Yeah.
If we would have bought when we were talking about it way before earnings and such, it's like
Yeah.
another missed opportunity.
Yeah, I gotta wait for a dip on that one.
Yeah,
But I
tariff
plan to
proof
start.
too. It's tariff proof for the most part.
Well,
Well,
no.
that's right. More tariffs.
Yep. And that's like after they announced tariffs on video productions made overseas, I went to check Netflix's stock. I was like, oh, did it drop so I
Right.
can get some? And it actually
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
But they also released a new feature where you can share moments. So if you're watching a video or a movie, you can share a moment from it with a person. And my first thought was, that's what YouTube already does that. You can
Yeah.
share clips.
Yeah.
So, Netflix is going after YouTube's pie in full force.
Yeah.
YouTube is going after Spotify's pie in full
Podcasts.
force.
Yeah. Who's going to win this war?
Yeah.
Netflix. I think Netflix is in a good spot.
I think Netflix is going to dominate.
Maybe I should get a job
right.
at Netflix.
Netflix is a good company.
Yeah. All right. Please feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk. I'm sure Matt would too. So reach out to either of us.
Not right now. I'm focused on my thing. But we have I'll tell you after.
Okay.
Anyways. All right, Tony. Well, that was a good segment. Some interesting things going on. And we'll connect again next week.
Yeah. There we go. See you later.
Bye.